We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Vav Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 66b. And the previous Amud Rabba said that Yish is Kona when it comes to Geneva, when it comes to stealing. And Rav Yosef said Yish is not Kona. And Rav Yosef is now asking on Rabba a question from a Mishnah. The Mishnah says if a person steals chametz and then Pesach passes, which means that the chametz is Asr Bahana, you can't get any benefit from the chametz. So the Mishnah says, Omer lo harei shel chalafanecha. The person who stole it can say to the person he stole it from, this is yours, I'm placing it before you, just return the actual item. Rashi says, Omer lo lenigzal, he can tell the nigzal, the person he stole it from, harei shel chalafanecha, this is yours in front of you, be'ein kemos shehu, I'm giving it to you, back to you as it is. The hezek she'eno nikru, because the damage that occurred is a damage that is not recognizable. You can't see the fact that it's prohibited to get benefit because Pesach passed, and that is how he returns the item. And the Gemara says, V'hai, but in this case, Kevan de Mata Idon Isura, when the time of Isser came, meaning when Pesach came and now Chametz becomes Asr, Vadai Miyayish, certainly the original owner was Miyayish, he certainly gave up hope on getting back his Chametz. V'salka Daitach Yish Kone, so therefore, says Rav Yosef to Rabba, if you think that Yish creates a Kinyan, Amai Omer Lo Harei Chalafanecha, why is he able to just say, take back your Chametz, which is now worthless, you can't get any benefit from it? Domi Me'aliyah Boy Shalumeli, he actually should have to pay him money, because the moment the Ganev, the moment the Gazlan makes a Kinyan, so at that moment he now owns the Chametz, because the original owner was Miyayish, and now he owes money to the original owner, and that should be the case over here. He should pay him money if it is correct that Yish is Kona. And the Gemara says, Amar Le, Rabba said back to Rav Yosef, Ki kwa amino ano, when did I say my halacha that Yish is Kona? That's Zem Misyayish v'zeh rotza liknos. That's if the original owner gives up hope, and the person who stole it wants to acquire. But in this case by Chametz, when we're talking about Chametz on Pesach, Zem Misyayish, it's true that this person is giving up hope, the original owner is giving up hope, v'zeh eino rotza liknos, but this person, he doesn't want to acquire Chametz on Pesach, and that's why it's not Kona in this case. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Abaye l'Rabba, Abaye asks Rabba the following question, some have the Girsa of Rava, Abaye asks Rava the following question, Karbono v'lo hagazal, it says that a person brings his carbon, when a person brings the carbon, it cannot be an animal that is stolen. And Rashi says, Karbano im ola karbano. This is a pasuk in the beginning of Sefer Vayikra. It says, if he brings his carbon ola, velo hagazal, it can't be stolen. The gazel lav l'ratzon asi, because if it's a stolen animal, it's not going to be an accepted carbon. Kasal gadaydach the gazel behem aschulin va'isi. Now, right now, we think the case is he stole an animal. When he stole the animal, it wasn't yet consecrated. It wasn't yet made into a carbon. It wasn't made hektish. And then hechidami inema. So then the Gemara is going to ask what exactly is the case, etc. And that's what the Gemara now says. Hechidami. What exactly is the case that the person stole this animal and now he wants to bring it as a carbon? If the case is that he stole the animal and the original owner has not given up hope, so lamali kra, why would we even need a pasuk to tell us that you can't make it hektish, that you can't make it a carbon? Pshita, it's obvious, of course you can't make it hektish, he doesn't even own the animal. He stole the animal, he doesn't own the animal, it really belongs to the original owner. Of course he can't be makdish such an animal. Elalav, rather is it not, lachar yish, that the case is the original owner gave up hope, and therefore you might have thought yish is kani, that he acquires the animal and he can make it hektish, and that's what it's saying, shma amina. The point of the Bryce has come to teach us, the pasuk is teaching us yish lo kani, that yish is not going to create a Kenyan, and that's why he's not able to make it hektish, he can't make it a carbon. And so the Gemara says, Amar le Rava, Rava said back to him, Vilataimech, according to your reasoning, and Rashi explains, Vilataimech, according to your reasoning, that you think the case is that he stole an animal that's chulin, and now the gazlan, the person who stole it, wants to make it hektish, wants to make it a carbon. So according to your reasoning, Hadatanya, what about that which we learned in a brisa? This is by Zav. The halach is that if a Zav lies down on something, so that thing, that item is the mishkav hazav, it becomes tameh. And Tanya, we learned in a brisa, mishkav v'lo hagazal, it has to be his mishkav, and it can't be stolen. Rashi explains, Hadatanya gabe Zav mishkavo. It says the item that he lies down on that's his. Ish asher yiga b'mishkavo. It says a person touches that which he lies on. Gezeras hakasov lahotzi es hamishkav hagazal. The gezeras hakasov is we're excluding something that's mishkav that was stolen. She'eno nasa avatoma. Then the mishkav would not become an avatoma l'tamei adam to then be able to be metame people. So it says mishkavo v'lo hagazal. So if you're understanding that the case of karbono v'lo hagazal is he steals an animal and makes it hektish, then you should have a similar case by mishkavo. Hechidami, well, what would be that case? Ilema de gazel imrov avde mishkav. If the case is that he stole wool and then he made it into a mishkav, he made it into something that he could lie down upon. So does anyone hold that a shinoi maisa, that if you have a physical change that it's not a kinyan? Of course, that would be a kinyan. In such a situation, if a person stole wool and then made that into a mishkav, of course that would count in terms of Tomas Mishkav, so that cannot be the case. Elamai is loch l'meimer, so rather, what do you have to say? The gazal Mishkav dechavre, you have to say the case is that he stole what was already a Mishkav, he didn't do anything to it, he just stole the Mishkav, and we're saying, since it's stolen, it doesn't have a halacha of Mishkav, so hachanami, the gazal carbon dechavre, so too over here, the case is not that he stole an animal that was chulin, he stole an animal that was already a carbon, it was made a carbon by the other person, and then already it makes sense to say, karbono v'lo hagazal, and Rashi explains, do any of them Amoraim say Shinoi lo kani, that a Shinoi is not kona? Ha-b'yish of the plea. The whole machlokas is by yish. So again, obviously the case is the gazal mishkav dechavre, and therefore now Rashi explains the gazal the carbon dechavre. In the same case is by carbon. He stole the carbon of his friend, and Rashi says shehikdish chavero. Again, his friend is the one that made it hektish. He made it into a carbon. And the way Rashi first understands the Gemara is the Gemara is saying uliolam lifnei yish, and really what we're talking about over here is before yish. The point is that the original owner was not miyayish, and we're saying karbono v'lo hagazel, meaning v'yitzrech lashmin, and it's teaching us the eino ola l'ratzon klal v'afilu l'baylam harishonim, that the carbon is not going to be accepted at all, even for the original owner. Maybe you would think since it's before yish, and therefore there was no real kinyan by the gazlan, maybe it will be accepted as a carbon for the original owner. V'afagav d'lo have a yish, even though there is no yish over here. Maybe you would think then we're saying no, karbono v'lo hagazel, it's not accepted at all. Lishnachrin, another explanation of what the Gemara is saying, the gazal carbon dechavre, that he stole a carbon of his friend, hilkach afilu la'achar yish lo kanya, and therefore even after yish, it's not going to be a kinyan, even though it could be that yish does create a kinyan in general, but over here that won't be effective. Why? The carbon eino nigzal, because a carbon can never be stolen. The chol hecha de isei begazad rachman isei, because when you're talking about hektish, wherever it is, it's really under the authority of the merciful one. It's really under the authority of the Beis HaMikdash of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we will take a look at Tosas as well, the gazal mishkav dechavre, that he stole the mishkav of his friend. That's how we're understanding it in terms of mishkav, and we're saying mishkavo v'lo hagazal. Mashma mitoch perush hakontras. Tosas say it's implied from the explanation that Rashi gives, sharatz alomer, that the Gemara means to say in terms of mishkav gomer shel chaveru, he stole a mishkav of his friend. It was already prepared as something to lie upon. Im gazlo ein mitame mishkav. But if he steals it, there is no tumas mishkav. The gzeiras hakasavu, that it's a Gzeres HaKasav. Tosas say Vizehu Tema. This is a wonderment to give this explanation, and Tosas discuss this issue. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Eisvei Abaye Rav Yosef. Abaye asks Rav Yosef the following question. Again, Rav Yosef is the one that says that Yush is not Kona. And Abaye asks the question from a Mishnah in Kalim. Oros shel Bal Habayis, if you have the hides, the leather of a Bal Habayis. The point is, this is not like a storekeeper, somebody who tans hides for a living and sells things. This is just owned by a Bal Habayis. Machshava mitamasan. So the Machshava, the intent of the Bal Habayis, will say that this is a finished product. Only if it's a finished product can it receive Tumah. And if he has the machshava that it's a finished product, it will be able to be mekabel tumah. But let's say it's somebody who tans the hides, he does it as a profession, so then his intent is not going to say that it's mekabel tumah. Shal ganav, if it is the oros of a ganav again is somebody who steals, but he steals in secrecy, machshava metamasan, so then the machshava is metame. Shal gazlan, but if it's a gazlan, ein machshava metamasan, the machshava is not metame. And the difference seems to be it's whether or not there is yush or not. The assumption is that by a ganav, so then there is yish according to the Tana Kamma. That's why machshava metamasan, he acquires it. By a gazlan, the gazlan took it by force, and there is no yish. The original owner thinks he can get it back, so ein machshava metamasan. Rabbi Shimon Omer chilaf hadvarim. Rabbi Shimon says it's just the opposite. Shal gazlan machshava metamasan. It's a gazlan that the machshava can make a tamei. There we say there is yish. V'shal ganav ein machshava metamasan. But by a ganav, the machshava of the ganav does not make it tamei. Lafisha lonis yayish rabayim, because there's no yish by a ganav. It's just a machlokes whether there's yish by a gazlan or whether there's a yish by a ganav. Ushmami no yish kona. But regardless, we see from this Mishnah that yish is kona. That's why it's a question on Rav Yosef. And Rashi explains, Machshava metamasan bal habayis eino asay lemochron. A bal habayis doesn't sell the leather. V'osa mehan mitos v'dulvkos v'katablos mishachashav alein l'davar sharoylo. He's going to make something out of it, and when he has the intent to do that, below chisar malach, and there's nothing left to do with the item, mekabel tumah miyad. So it's a finished product. It's mekabel tumah. V'shalavdan. But if it's somebody who is professional with it, ha'asay limchon, he's going to sell it. Ein machshavto metamaso. So then his intent isn't going to make it that it's mekabel tumah. Diavad demimlach. Sometimes he'll change his mind. And he'll sell it. Maybe the buyer is going to make shoes out of it. Therefore, it's not considered to be a finished product, and it's not mekabel tumah. Ganav, his machshava will make a mekabel tumah to konano b'yish, because there's a kinyan through yish to kasavar, because this Tana holds stam geneva yish bailami, that by cases of geneva, the original owner does give up. He doesn't know who to claim it from. He doesn't know who stole it from him. It was stolen in secrecy. Mishal gazlan, ein machshava metamasan, and of a gazlan, the machshava is not metame. Even though he did have intent that there's no more malacha to do with it, various examples of, again, a finished product. According to this Tana, again, by Gezela there is no yish. Since he knows who took it, he'll take him to court. Then Rabbi Shimon says the opposite, stam Gezela iko yish, that by Gezela there's yish. Since he took it by force, in Ishalma, who's a strong person, there's no hope to get it back. Aval stam geneva leko yish, but by geneva there's no yish. The savar mashkachna le leganav, he figures he'll find the ganav. And so again, the point over here is, we do have a question. It seems that yish is kona. And the Gemara continues. Amar Lei Rav Yosef responds to Abaya, Hacha b'mayaskin. On here, what are we talking about in this Mishnah in Meseches Kalim? Kagon Shekitzon. We're talking about a situation where the person who stole it, he trimmed the leather, so there was a shinoi maisa, and that's what's creating the kinyan together with the yish. Rashi says Shekitzon deika tarta. You have two things that are creating the kinyan: shinoi maisa v'yish. It's the shinoi maisa, that small change, that physical change in the item, together with the yish. Uliolam yish gerei de lokani, and really yish alone will not create a kinyan. When it implies over here that yish creates the kinyan, it's in conjunction with this shinoi maisa of trimming the leather. And the Gemara continues, Maskeflo Rabba bar Rav Chanan. Rabba bar Rav Chanan asked on this answer, Valo itzva shanukan. But doesn't the Mishnah Meseches Kalim right before it talks about itzva, which is a leather tabletop? The itzva ein sricha kitzua, and an itzva does not need to be trimmed. The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah over there, kol makom she'ein chisarn malacha. Anytime that the item is not lacking any physical work, machshava mitamasa. So then, as long as the intent is that it's a final product, it can be mekabel tumah. Yesh chesar malacha, but if it's missing work, if there actually has to be something physical done to the item, ein machshava mitamasa. So then, just having the intent and saying that it's complete is not enough to have it be mekabel tumah. Chutz minha itzva, with the exception of this leather tabletop. And Rashi explains, valo itzva shanu kan shechishav alein leitzva dulveki she'ochlin olav uchein shulchan. Who again, it's talking about a situation where you had this intent that it should be like a tabletop which you eat which you eat upon. It's like a table, as Rashi says. Ve'itzva eina tzricha kitzua, and itzva does not require trimming. Develav kitzua nami metama. Even without trimming it, it still could be mekabel tumah. Da'achazi lamilse, because it's fit to use for its purpose. Sha'kitzua eino asli ela liyafos, because kitzua is only done, the trimming is done to make it look nicer. Umenot teimra devi'itzva kosik. Now, how do we know that this Mishnah is talking about, that our Mishnah, the first Mishnah we brought, is talking about an itzva, this leather tabletop? The Tanan gabe dahi b'Meseches Kalim, because right by this very Mishnah it says kol makom shein chisar malacha. It talks about situations without a chisar malacha, and it talks about the itzva. Chutz min ha'Itzva, except for the itzva. She'af al pisha mechaser kitzua machshava mitamasa. So the point is, even though you didn't trim it, still the machshava, the intent to say that it is a final product, is enough to make it mekabel tumah. The point over here is that if the Mishnayos and Kalim are talking about something like an itzva which doesn't require trimming, so how can you say over here that the robber trimmed it and the trimming together with the yish is what created the kinyan? That doesn't make any sense by itzva. Itzva is something that doesn't require kitzua, so that answer would not fit. It would not work for this Mishnah Meseches Kalim. And so the Gemara says, Ela Amar Rava, rather Rava says as follows: Haimilsa Kashiba Rabba Rav Yosef Esrin V'Tartin Shenin. This issue, Rabba asked Rav Yosef for 22 years. V'lo Ifrika Ad Yosef Rav Yosef Bereisho Pirka, and it was not answered until Rav Yosef sat at the head. He became the Rosh Yeshiva, and he answered the question as follows. In other words, again, the question over here is, the Mishnah in Kalim seems to imply that the Yish is going to be what creates the Kinyan, but he answered as follows, Shinoi Hashem Keshinoi Maisa Dami. Shinoi Hashem, if the item changes its name, what it's referred to as, that is like a Shinoi Maisa. Shinoi Maisa, my time, what is the reason by Shinoi Maisa? Hasam Meikara Eitzim Hashta Kalim. The reason over there why Shinoi Maisa works is because originally it's called Eitzim, and then it's called Kalim, it's called wood, then it's called a vessel. Shinoi Hashem Nami, when it comes to Shinoi Hashem as well, when something changes its name, what you refer to it as, Meikara Karule Mishcha, originally it's referred to as Mishcha, Vahashta Abarzin, and now it's referred to as Abarzin. Rashi says Abarzin hu Itzva. Abarzin is another word for Itzva. It is now referred to as this leather tabletop, Beloshan Arami, in the Arami language. Avol Yish Gerei de Lokani, but again, Yish alone is not going to create the Kinyan. Essentially, what he's answering is that the Mishnah Meseches Kalim is not referring to a Kinyan through Yish, is referring to a Kinyan through a combination of Yish and Shinoi Hashem. But the Gemara now continues and asks, if we're saying that originally it's called a Mishcha, it's called hide, and now it's called a Barzin, and that's a Shinoi Hashem, V'harei Morish, but what about if a person steals a beam? The Iko Shinoi Hashem, there's a Shinoi Hashem over there as well. The Meikara Kashura, originally it's called a Kashura, it's called a beam before you put it into a building. V'hashta Talol, and once you put it into a building, it's called a Talola. As Rashi says, the Meikara Kashura Kodim Shanitan Bebinyan, before you put it in the building, it's called a Kashura. V'hashta Talola, and then once you put it in the building, it's called a Talola. Talala means a gag, a roof. La'achar shenasnu babira v'nosin all of tikras nisarim va'aliyah. Once you put it into the building, you put these beams on, this roof, this attic, then it's called a talala, so there's a shinei Hashem. Utanan, and yet we learned in a Mishnah, al hamorish hagazel, if somebody steals a morish, if somebody steals this beam, shebeno babira, and it gets built into a building, shenot el damav, so in that case, the person who stole it doesn't have to knock down the whole building just to return the beam. Instead, the person who was stolen from collects money instead. Mipnei takonas hashavim, that's a takonas hashavim. It's a takana that helps to return the item to the person who was stolen from, because otherwise no one's going to return anything, no one's going to knock down a whole building just to return a beam. And so the Gemara says, the only reason that money is being paid over here is because of a takonas hashavim. Rashi says, alamarish, again, kora is a beam, the takonas kachashiv ve'azol b'Meseches Gittin. What's going on over here in these Mishnayos in Meseches Gittin is they're talking about different takonas. In any case, it says over here, it's only because of takonas hashavim. That implies that there is no kinyan through Shinoi Hashem, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Zayin Amud Aleph.